Ladies and gentlemen, as project leader of this event today, I'm very proud to announce to you the informal Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Ruud Koornstra, who will be the next moderator for this session. You're probably aware that the Prime Minister was at the last session. It was a very good session, but in this session we'll go a little further. Ruud is the man who introduced electrical driving to the Netherlands with his company, Tendris. You're the guy who produced LED lighting in 2009, whereas Philips at that moment said, no, we can only do that in maybe 2018. You proved them wrong, and you do a lot of other amazing things, so you're not just a moderator. I wish the three of you lots of fun, and all of you have fun with this session.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this beautiful commercial for my small company. I really then, okay, it's payback time. The last 6 months, you were my boss. You were the chief, the pilot in command for this huge event. And you're from the government, so it's a dirty job, but someone has to do it. Please, a warm applause for Erika Kuller. It's not easy to organize such an event because it's an event about dreams. And if you're from the government, it's not easy to dream about things because you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed you have to stay with both feet on the ground. The teacher told us that in school, our parents told us that. Our bankers told us, please stay with both feet on the ground in this terrible world. So I like to do a small experiment. Please, can you stand up? With both feet on the ground. And in this world, we really want to make a step forward. So please, can you do a step forward with both feet on the ground? That's impossible. So we have to dream. And now we have 2 presentations about dreamers. And entrepreneurs, they're real dreamers. And successful entrepreneurs or dreamers who never give up. They never give up. They never give up. So we have to dream. We have to dream for our future. I'd like to introduce you to the first presentation, Eva Gladek. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here on this Innovation Festival event. I am the CEO and director of a small company based here in Amsterdam North called Metabolic. We're a clean tech development and systems consulting firm focused on transitioning the world to a more sustainable state. And my talk today is called Leverage Points and Root Causes, Keys to Societal Transformation. And actually, even though it sounds like a bit of an academic and technical story, it's actually quite a personal story for me because from the time that I was a kid, I was really looking for better and more important, more effective ways to have impact. And that's what I'm going to share with you today, is a lot of the insight that we apply on actually how to achieve transitions in a more effective way. So to start with, heading back into the past, when I was 13, I was planning on becoming a biologist. My parents were immigrants from communist Poland. They were basically economic refugees, and they weren't very interested in environmentalism. What they were most focused on was actually innovation and the potential for economic development and all the things that weren't possible in communist Poland at that time. So that was how I was raised, and the focus was really on bringing this forward into my career. And so when I was in college, I was studying molecular genetics, and what you see behind me, this is a site that I saw all the time. These are flasks of E. coli medium, and on the right side you see the graph of the E. coli growth pattern. And I was always really fascinated that after I would inoculate one of these flasks, it would take 24 hours before you could even really see the E. coli clouding up. But then in the exponential growth phase, it would go so quickly that the entire flask would cloud up, and suddenly going from half full to full, in the last doubling, the E. coli would start to die. So I only had like a 5-minute window to harvest the bacteria. And I wasn't really interested or thinking about environmentalism per se until when I was in college studying biology and looking at these E. coli graphs all the time, I ran into these graphs. So these graphs are hockey stick curves. They're exponential graphs. They show how a number of different key parameters for lots of different aspects of our society are also growing along this exponential growth pattern. And when I saw this, I was kind of shocked and worried because I knew what happens to these E. coli, that in this exponential growth phase, then soon after that, the entire population crashes and it's over. And I thought, oh no, this is actually what's happening with a lot of the things that with our E. coli flask, and that's not good. And so, of course, behind these exponential graphs, there's a lot of drivers. So there's population growth, there's the expansion of wealth, there's climate change, there's all sorts of issues going on, hunger, poaching. Down on the bottom right, this is shopping on Black Friday in the United States. So these are all sorts of the drivers that are leading to these exponential growth curves. And what that has done is actually that we are crossing key planetary boundaries. So this is research that was done by the Stockholm Resilience Center. In the sort of gray circle up to where the bars go yellow, that's the defined the safe zone for our planet. And beyond that, you get into the red zone, which is actually the unsafe zone. So we're actually coming close to that peak where the exponential growth curve starts crashing. And that's quite an issue. So I started to think about, okay, so how do we address these problems? I gave up biology. I started fully focusing on sustainability as a career. I studied something called industrial ecology, which is the science of sustainability. And after many different career moves, so I first started as a science journalist and then finally went into sustainability consulting, I eventually started Metabolic, because I really wanted to get in on the action. So we're a systems consulting and clean tech development firm. We have this kind of pipeline of activities, so from consulting where we do analysis on the global system through technology development all the way to ventures, so starting new companies that address the problem. And when I started Metabolic, I was like, okay, we need to take this from a really systemic perspective. We have to understand where are the real leverage points and what's working? What are the things that we're actually doing to actually fix this exponential growth pattern? Which ones of them are working and which ones are not? So I started to do this kind of investigation. What of the environmental sort of approaches that we're taking so far have been effective? And all of you are familiar with the hundreds and thousands at this point of environmental certifications for products. You've also seen probably that corporate social responsibility has become pretty much a standard thing for companies, and that investment in clean technologies and clean development is all going up. So this is great. And actually, one of the big drivers behind this approach is a kind of theory that has been put forward in policy called eco-economic decoupling. So the idea is, and actually if any of you were at the morning session with the Prime Minister, you probably heard at the end of the talk that, growth is great and we can continue to grow the economy with new sustainable approaches. And this is one of the sort of leading ideas that underpins eco-economic decoupling. The idea is that we can continue to grow the economy. Normally, the growth of the economy is connected to resource throughput, so extracting more resources and producing more products, which is actually what links to the impacts. But in the decoupling idea, the notion is that we can actually figure out ways to make economic growth happen while increasing the efficiency of the use of resources, therefore actually lowering resource throughput and impact while still increasing economic growth. So this is a wonderful idea in theory, and it's definitely something that has to happen regardless. But the problem is that it's actually not really working. So despite a lot of policy efforts and all these different sort of great progress steps, investment, et cetera, we are not nearly in the range, in the ballpark of decoupling that is necessary to actually avoid these crashes. You can see that what's happening is that we're having a level of relative decoupling, but in terms of absolute, so the green line, the resources are still going up as population and GDP continues to increase. And actually, people have calculated that we probably need a factor 10 absolute decrease in resource throughput. So regardless of population growth, we need to hit 10 times fewer resources consumed. and that's not really happening. The other thing is this is just a scoreboard from the Millennium Development Goals that look beyond just resources at other factors like human health and well-being, education. Everywhere that's red or yellow, things are not going so well. And everywhere that's green, things are going a little bit better. So you can see it's really mixed progress, but it's not happening fast enough. So the question is, okay, if this economic decoupling philosophy and model isn't working, or what's wrong with it, and how do we move forward? And the answer that I came to in all of my work is that what we need to understand is that we're working with a complex system. That actually, the sort of, when you make a change to a complex system, it doesn't necessarily have the results that you're expecting. This picture shows a road. Transport is associated with around 20% of all greenhouse gas emissions on the planet, so it's obviously one focal area. And I just want to give this as an example of why decoupling as a strategy doesn't always work. Even though over the last between 1998 and 2013, we had a 15% increase in efficiency of vehicles. That's not necessarily even in the ballpark of what we need for the right level of decoupling. But in addition to that, we have a systems problem. And that is that there's something called rebound effects in systems. So this is something called the Jevons paradox. And it shows that when you have technological progress that increases the efficiency with which a resource is used, actually people use more of that resource. So if you have more efficient light bulbs, people just turn on their lights more. And more efficient cars, people drive more. So what do you do with that? And if you take it from a systems perspective, you start to realize that we can actually solve these problems by addressing root causes instead of symptoms. So cars themselves, people are going to continue driving and using them, and they should, because the way that we've structured our built environment, it necessitates it. You need a car to participate in society. This is just the way it's done. So if you see on the right here, this is a picture of Los Angeles, a small part of it, and you can see this massive, massive urban sprawl. Low-density housing, as far as you can see, for kilometers in every direction, and there's a lot of development like this. This is actually development that requires the use of vehicles. Until we address that, it doesn't matter how efficient we make our cars, people are going to continue requiring them, needing them, and using them. And so we're actually working at the wrong level of the system. We're working far too low. We actually have to make an environment where we really genuinely don't need cars, and then you can have them for specific uses like long-distance trips and fun vacations. So this gets to the point of effectiveness versus efficiency. People bring this up a lot in working habits and life. Effectiveness is actually doing the right things, so focusing on the right problems at the right level, whereas efficiency is doing things right, so doing things as best as you can, as quickly as you can. And actually, Factor 10 thinking and this decoupling model is often focused on efficiency. So we're doing the same stuff, but we're just trying to do it better and better. But if we're growing exponentially, the gains that we get are always going to be swallowed up by any sort of by that continued growth. So what we actually have to do is focus on effectiveness and doing things right, intervening in the right part of the system and actually focusing on the goals that we want to achieve as an outcome. And that brings another question. Do we really want economic growth, or do we want growth in well-being, which isn't actually very well correlated with economic growth? But that's a whole other can of worms we're not going to necessarily get into. And the one thing that I have shown here as an example of this is this is an electrical pepper mill. So you can actually grind your pepper with a battery, etc. Completely useless. My parents had one. I kind of yelled at them for it. And this is something you can say, like, yes, we'll make this 10 times more efficient. But you can also just, buy powdered pepper or hand grind it, right? So it's an illustration, a case in point. So the systemic approach relies on also understanding that we're working with something like a Rubik's Cube, that when you try to move one tile into the right place, but everything else moves, you have to understand that everything is moving when you're trying to mess with a system. And that's what we have to do. We have to take problem solving from that perspective. Okay, so this brings me to another topic, which is the circular economy, because the circular economy is a big buzzword here, and the Netherlands is a circular hotspot, and that's great. It's often defined in contrast to the linear economy. So obviously here we have the take, make, waste resources, and this is a nice summary. Whereas the circular economy is all about new business models that facilitate recovering resources and components throughout that life cycle. Very material focused, usually, in the way that it's talked about. And the reason that it's super popular is this quote from the EMF and McKinsey study, which is that we actually can save up to 630 billion per year by moving to this model. However, what we've actually been trying to focus on is that if you focus on just this, the circular economy is just another approach towards decoupling in the traditional sense. It's make more money while becoming more efficient, but it doesn't actually necessarily focus on the systemic level, and that's something that we really need to do. So we actually have created principles for a circular economy that go beyond just looking at material cycles, but in fact, you actually need to look beyond the materials and really consider all of these different sort of Rubik's Cube-like relationships. So how do we actually apply this stuff? And I'm going to very quickly show maybe a couple of examples from our work at Metabolic at how we're actually looking at the system to find the key leverage points for real transition, so not having solutions of today become the problems of tomorrow, but really looking at it from a holistic perspective. And the way that we start is actually by analyzing the system, so understanding what is not linear about our economy, where are the places to intervene. This graphic shows an analysis that we did of the entire global material flow. So we looked at everything that's extracted on the planet, and you can see it's to size, so all the lines are scaled, except for water, which is on a logarithmic scale because there's so much more of it by volume. And actually, what's interesting is you can see, okay, so down there at the very end, you have one small green line, which is recycled. So that's the amount that's recycled compared to this volume that's extracted every year. This is what we mean by linear economy. And then the other thing is that the lines, the thicknesses of the lines don't always correspond to impact. So one of the most important things is that actually the green section there that shows biomaterials is associated with a vast majority of a lot of the key impacts that are leading to planetary boundary transgressions because it involves land use, habitat destruction, water use, etc. So also this whole idea of just move everything to bio-based isn't necessarily a solution from a systemic perspective. We have to think about reusing waste streams in the right ways and actually creating solutions that consider all of these types of impacts. So based on that analysis, we found out where are the key hotspots where we need to focus for transitioning to a circular economy. And we have cities in the built environment, chemicals, agriculture, wastewater, mobility and transport, electronics, and C&D, construction and demolition waste. And I have a few examples from each of them. All right, so for one thing, the reason that we identify cities as a leverage point is because of these factors. So they only occupy 3% of the land surface, so it's a concentrated physical area. They produce most GDP, 80%, and also 90% of innovation, 50% of global waste, consume 75% of natural resources, and are responsible for 60 to 80% of greenhouse gas emissions. So the idea is if you can just figure out how to change the way that cities are designed and reconfigure them, you can really have a massive effect on the entire problem spectrum that we're dealing with. So this is actually a great place to intervene. And so what we did is we took all of these principles of a circular economy from a holistic perspective, and we worked with the City of Amsterdam, with Waternet, and with the Alliantie, so 3 parties here in Amsterdam, to develop a plan for transitioning this area, well, actually very close to this area, Buiksloterham, a neighborhood here in North, to a circular city model, really considering at what scale do you want to close material cycles and looking at mobility and wastewater and waste management, et cetera. The great thing about this is that there are actually projects happening on the ground as a result. So a lot of those principles that we've set in this high-level picture are now getting translated to on-the-ground activities. And up on the top left, that's a picture of what Buiksloterham could look like. And then the rest of these pictures are from a project that we did in Buiksloterham that kind of kicked this off, which was the Keuvel, the reuse of an old shipyard to actually produce a temporary creative work and environment that is the first circular neighborhood in Amsterdam. So then going to products, which actually, if you focus on cities, you really need the hinterland where all the resources are coming from. That's still one of the main issues, the main things that you need to deal with. And actually, there's a couple of ways to look at it. There's been a lot of focus in the circular economy world on fast-moving consumer goods, right? So things like clothing or like gadgets, et cetera. But from our analysis, we actually saw that this is only 4.5% of annual material extraction, so not so much. But there's still quite a lot of opportunity for improvement. So figuring out how to actually design products for disassembly so that you can actually get all those materials and resources out, and making the same products and services better. But actually where there's a much bigger opportunity is this kind of disruptive thinking out of the box. So a majority of the products or the materials that we're extracting end up dispersed into the environment, so lost forever. And this is by design. So road chemicals or field chemicals or paints, these things are just permanently never recoverable. So even you can't circularize it. So actually what you need to do is think of new types of solutions. And this is actually 30% of annual material extraction can be solved through this kind of disruption. There's two examples here. On the left, we have lotus sand paint. So this is a kind of paint that's modeled after the leaves of a lotus flower, and it can lead to self-cleaning buildings. So instead of having to repaint them or clean them, they can actually clean themselves like a leaf. And on the right, we have Morphotex fabric. So actually, if you might not know this, but most brightly colored animals don't actually use any pigments in coloring themselves. The way that the color is so bright, like with peacocks or butterflies, is actually through a change in the nanostructure of the material, so of the feathers or of the wings, and that's what produces the color. So a company called Morphotex tried to do this with fabric, so that we don't need to use paints anymore in our fabric. And that would be amazing because a lot of these things are toxic and produce these kind of negative cycles. So these are two examples. I'm not going to talk about agriculture, although this is one of my most pet topics because it's so impactful. For one thing, we did recently, this is going to be released this month, a study of the global food system together with WWF. And this graph, I'll just point out this fact, is that global biodiversity loss is at least 80% traceable back to biological material extraction because of all the different sort of activities and stresses that it places on the environment. So actually, and even further, only a few products can be associated with most of the biodiversity loss. So just by changing eating patterns very slightly, we could have a huge impact on transitioning the way that biodiversity loss specifically looks. This is the sort of power of looking at things from a systemic perspective and finding these higher leverage points. Most importantly, though, what we found is that there's actually structural causes that are really leading to keeping the food system in a non-functioning way. One of the root causes that most people know about is poverty traps. And actually, rather than focusing on increasing productivity and increasing yields here in the developed world, one of the most important things that we need to do to make sure that the food system is functioning by 2050 is to support sub-Saharan African farmers specifically, where there are the lowest yields in the world, 500 times lower than anywhere else, and also where people are going to be, where population is going to be increasing the most. And that brings us kind of close to home, because this morning also someone from Friesland Campina was speaking, and talking about the great value of overproducing milk in a sense for export. But that's actually exactly not what we need to be doing in the Netherlands. The country is 40% land surface used for dairy production. The amount of manure that is overproduced is at such a level that it's creating a huge nitrogen crisis, and nitrogen is one of the boundaries that has been most severely crossed. And actually, we should not be producing more milk or more cows here. It's just from a systemic perspective, again, looking at the wrong focal point. And that leads me to my final concluding thought, is that I think the Netherlands is actually a perfect country to be the center for a circular economy and a leader in terms of circularity. But what has to happen is that we need to look at the circular economy from a systemic perspective and not from a standard eco-economic decoupling model. We need to ask harder questions. We need to really consider why we're doing certain things and not just whether we can make them, the things that we're already doing, a little better. So thank you very much. I look forward to the next talk.
Eva Gladek. Can anybody do a small summary of this presentation for me? Great. It was a real speed presentation. But do we have enough time to make the transition to another sustainable state?
I think, honestly, we have to hurry, but we do. And one of the things that I think is interesting about exponential growth is that it's a double-edged sword. You know, when you find something that actually does a positive thing in an exponential direction, it can quickly fix the problem. So that's why it's so important to focus on where are these leverage points so that we can find them and hopefully have a chance of transitioning.
So you're not afraid for the future?
Sure, but it's a very exciting time to be alive. You know.
Oh, maybe we have to ask the people from Friesland Campina, is the cow also your mother? Then we have another discussion. But okay, thank you very much. And we see each other in about 15 minutes, because then we have a little chat with you on stage, if you like.
Great.
The next presentation, I think it's also high speed, so fasten your seatbelts. It's Martijn Aslander. Okay, Martijn, please start with your presentation, and after that we have some discussion about the book, because I think this is about the management book of the year. But it's my opinion. It's not. I'm not.
We have to wait for that.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Hello.
Martijn Aslander.
Always interesting to see what they make out of it. This is me. My life is about exploring the network and information age. It's what I call the new renaissance. And my life has always been about connecting people, information, and ideas. Because if you want to set anything in motion on this planet, if you want to solve a problem, if you want to create or go after a big opportunity, or if you want to do Mission Impossible, it's what I like personally, you need people you don't know yet, you need information, and you need ideas. But ideas are worthless. You need information and people to manifest it in the here and now. So this is my holy trinity of dynamics: people, information, and ideas. It's been said, we live in very interesting times. And there's this today's about innovation. There's something funny going on in the area of innovation. Innovation used to lead to economic growth. But we don't see that happen. We read the newspapers. There is no economic real growth anymore. And there was this book from Ruud Koornstra who said, well, there are no real new innovation, no big innovation. The washing machine was one of the biggest innovations, and after that, well, Uber is not really interesting. Whatever happened after the washing machine, that's not interesting from an economic perspective. And he's right, but he's also wrong, because there's something very funny going on when it comes to innovation. Last 70 or maybe 100 years, innovation led to economic growth. And why was that? Well, the car was more expensive than the bike. The television was more expensive than the radio. The computer was more expensive than the typewriter. The washing machine was more expensive than the washing tub. But because of digitization, which is the same to me as dematerialization, something new is going on. A WhatsApp message is faster, better, and cheaper than a text message. Netflix is faster, better, and cheaper than VHS. The navigation app on your iPhone is better, cheaper, and faster than your TomTom navigator. Wikipedia is faster, cheaper, and better than the Encyclopedia Britannica. So we are now entering an age where innovation does not lead anymore to economic growth. When you look at economic growth from a monetary perspective, I think economic growth is not the same as financial growth. I think we have to skip that. So the world of innovation that we're entering right now, you have to regard it from another perspective. I think it doesn't lead to more financial growth, but we don't really need that, because we have bigger fish to fry. I think this economic growth will lead to more access of anyone on this planet to services that we can use to create even more awesome stuff. We see that happening all the time right now because of the web. In June, I will be attending this meeting in Geneva. It's one of the weirdest meetings on Earth. I have to be there. It's the official meetup from the UN Committee of the members of the peaceful users of outer space. What will happen there is that there will be dealt with the ownership rights of 150 million asteroids in space with a diameter bigger than 100 meters. That's huge. So we have billions or trillions of asteroids. We identified a lot of them, but 150 million of them, we have to talk about it. Who owns them? Why on Earth or why on space would you want to talk about it from a United Nations perspective? Well, those asteroids are not made of dust. Because if you use all the technology that's available right now, like a gyrospectrometer, you can use that to identify the content of an asteroid. What turns out is that a part of the asteroids are made of platinum and silver or rare materials that we don't even have here on Earth. So from an economic perspective, we look at the mining industry. If you're a pension fund, it felt okay to invest in mining companies because, yeah, gold is scarce, diamonds are scarce. But actually, because of the convergence of exponential technologies, asteroid mining may be a reality by 2025. This is weird stuff. I mean, I'm not a technical guy, and I always thought space, that's not my cup of tea. But we see Jeff Bezos of Amazon, we see Elon Musk, we see Richard Branson, all kinds of innovators and entrepreneurs going after space. And because of the convergence of an explosion of innovation, this will be real, well, maybe not in 2025, then it's 2030. But what will happen if you can bring limitless amounts of gold to the Earth? What will do that with the price of gold? Interesting. Other stuff is happening also. Let's say that you're in an industry and you have an annual turnover in the entire industry of $40 billion. A lot of money. And let's say that you are the CEO of this company with a comfortable 10% market share. So you make $4 billion every year, over and over again. And the market that you're in is the market for diagnosis and treatment of pancreatic cancer. The type of cancer that Steve Jobs had when he died. If you get pancreatic cancer, you will die. The chance that you will survive is 2%. And then there was this guy a few years ago called Jack Andraka. Jack was only 13 years old. He was a nerd and he was gay in the wrong part of the United States, and somebody in the family died of pancreatic cancer. And he was very sad and upset. He was not particularly rich or well-connected or whatever, and he was a nerd and gay, so he locked himself in his room, jumped behind his computer and tried to figure out why is pancreatic cancer not solved yet. And it turns out that with the use of Wikipedia and Google, freely accessible to anyone on Earth with access to the web, he discovered the existence of biomarkers. He never heard of it, so he dove into that. And then he read something about nanotubes, and he thought, oh, that is cool. And within 2 years, he figured out a way that is 196 times faster, 400 times more accurate, but most important, 26,000 times cheaper than all the existing solutions in this $40 billion market. Basically, a 15-year-old kid without any education, experience, money, or network, solve something completely very complex, like the diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. So he will win a Nobel Prize. He killed an entire market on his own in only 2 years' time. And I think this is cool, not from an economic perspective when you look at the monetary part, but he will actually save lives. He will win a Nobel Prize for it, and he's not on his own. This is not a lone wolf with a weapon of mass destruction. This is an interconnected teen wolf with a weapon of mass disruption. And they are with millions of them, cooperating all together. Because they're not entrepreneurs, they're funtrepreneurs. They innovate because they can, not because of some business model that they want to make money with. So today we are here together to talk about innovation, to get enlightened, to get inspired. And one of the most inspiring things in this field, I think, at the moment is biohacking. It's where biology and technology are coming together. Really awesome, but also very scary stuff. Interesting, though. So I went to the Biohacking Summit 2 times in Helsinki. The next one I think is in November. You should really visit that. And here's also stuff going on that is really targeting entire markets, eradicating them. So I held this lecture a few weeks ago from people in the Netherlands who make stuff that you can use to make night vision goggles. This is military-grade stuff, high technology, a lot of technology, very expensive. It's also restricted. You cannot sell it to any country because of terrorism acts and stuff like that. But when you go and talk with the people of the biohacking community, you encounter people like this guy. This guy was fooling around with some fluids, and he figured out a fluid that if you drop it in your eyes, don't try it at home, you will have night vision for 6 hours. So you don't need a reading light in your bed when you want to read a book. It's basically, he figured out a way to make our eyes more sensitive to light, like cats have. He can put the recipe on the web, and the 5th or the 6th version of this stuff will be better. Bye-bye night goggles business. An entire industry eradicated by just one guy fooling around with knowledge that is freely accessible on the web. Because he can, not because he wants to build a business on it. Who of you have heard of this website called Instructables.com? Okay, I think this is the most disruptive website on earth. Forget about blockchain, forget about Bitcoin, forget about Tor, not interesting. This is really awesome stuff. This is the biggest database on earth with manuals how to manufacture something. Okay. This is from all the cool guys who know how to make something with their hands. Making stuff, doing real stuff in the real world used to be the area of companies and industries that needed money to innovate. But now it will be democratized. Because there's only one guy, you need only one guy to invent something, and 1.4 billion people can like it, 300 million people can share it, and 350 million people can like it on Twitter. So this is like the global brain, the global mind. So if you want to build a satellite to send a gyrospectrometer into space to discover what's in the asteroid, you only have to go to this place, because here you will learn how to build a satellite. And then there will be one guy who will say, well, at step 5 or 6 in your whole manual, you use this tool. And I found this new tool on Amazon, which is actually cheaper, and then you can go, you can do the whole process in half the time. So this will help mankind to solve things faster, better, cheaper. And who of you travels a lot to the United States? Anyone? You use a lock on your luggage? You lock your luggage? It's what a lot of people do. Well, in the United States, they have an agency called the TSA, the Transport Security Administration. I think they're the Department of the Homeland Security guys. And they said, well, you can lock your luggage if you want to, but we have to be able to open it to figure out if there's cocaine or stolen document or whatever in it. So we need to have a TSA-approved lock so they can open it. So what was happening is that there was a hacker, and he used a camera with a telelens to make a picture of the keychain of the guys of the TSA. And then he modded it, and right here I have the 6 master keys, the master locks, of all the few 100 million locks on Earth that are TSA approved. How cool is that? And it costed only, I think, 20 minutes to print it, and it's only, from a material perspective, 1 or 2 euros. It's plastic. Within a few months, I will have a metal version of it, because printing metal will become cheaper and more accessible to anyone on Earth. I think this is cool, because you use the same technique to solve a prosthesis for your arm. So there was this guy who had a kid that lost his arm in an accident. And it will cost you $50,000 to make a prosthesis for a prosthetic arm for a kid. But there's a problem with kids. If you feed them, which we tend to do, you need a new one next year because the kid will grow, and you need another 50,000 for the next version. So this guy went to the open source community and said, can we fix this? And he uses a 3D printer to create this prosthetic arm. Now it was 26 steps to print it and only $500, which is, I think, very good news. But they kept improving it. And now it's only $30 and only 2 steps to print it. This is what's happening on Earth. Bad for the economy, Very good news on a mankind level. So how do we have to deal with this type of development? It's bigger than anybody thinks. Well, this is one of my heroes, Seth Godin. I've met him a few times. He said, when everybody has access to the same tools, and everybody has, then having a tool isn't much of an advantage. Everybody has potential access to any production means you might need via the web. In the industrial age, long ago, the age of scarcity, we now live in a world of abundance, everything depended in part of having advantages that came with owning tools others didn't own. He says, that's not enough anymore. It's time for a new advantage. It might be your network, which is still important in the network age, of course, and it might be trust. And it even might be your expertise. So you work 30 years very hard on something, you're really good at something, or you might even have an MBA. Well, that's interesting, Seth Godin says. I think it's not enough. I think I'm betting it's your attitude. This, what Seth Godin here is stating, in the network and information age, your attitude towards others, towards knowledge, towards the world, is more important than all the networks you have and all your expertise. And I think he's right. And this is one of the things that I'm doing here in the Netherlands. I'm building swarms because we saw organizations, and then we saw network organizations, and then we saw networks. But what comes after networks? I think it's swarms. Ants are one of the most efficient species on Earth. They are with more. They're anywhere on Earth. Ants. They don't negotiate, they don't take notes, they don't need money, but they're highly efficient. And I think we're now on the verge of an age where mankind can act in a swarm, in an open source state of being where we can help each other. But how? One way to find out, and that is to test it. Who of you was using Gmail 8 years ago? Okay. 8 years ago, Gmail was in beta version. And it was a cool trick of Google. They said, well, we created something, it's not finished yet, you're allowed to use it, and if you have complaints, please tell us, then we can improve it. Which is a very cool trick to outsource all your research. So we said, what would happen if you would leave everything in a permanent beta stage? What would happen if by design you say to everybody, this is never finished. So we never have a finished product. Actually, Apple is already doing that. When you buy an iPhone, it's a beta version, because every time you connect it to the web, it will say, hey, we have new buttons, download the new option, and then you have a new version. And within a few years, you can just bring back your iPhone, they will tear it apart, they have even a nice new robot for it called, I forgot his name, Liam. Liam is a robot of Apple that is extracting all the materials out of the iPhone and reuses it in another one. So the iPhone is already in a perpetual, permanent beta way. So we created a swarm a few years ago, and we said, all the solutions for any problem in society are solvable when you connect brain, stack, and culture in those fields. Design thinking, tech, culture, everything. And nobody knows how. So we started this movement, sharing knowledge. It's freely accessible for everyone. We only needed 3 years to get a community or a swarm of 3,000 people. I'm predicting we will have something like 10,000 in 2 years. Those are all people who like 3D printing, algorithms, databases, but they're nerds, so they don't understand society very well. And the social pioneers of the Netherlands. Social pioneers, I love them. Entrepreneurial spirits who want to change education, which we have to do. They want to change healthcare, which we have to do. But they don't know algorithms, they don't know buttons. So if you connect those two together, you get leverage on a huge part. So we share knowledge on a big scale. We had more than 900 meetups, freely accessible to everyone on great locations. And the next time that we have a big day is here in Amsterdam, in a new building called Amsterdam Connected near Holendrecht. And then we have a day with more than 60 speakers on a single day on all those topics. Freely accessible for everyone, limited amount of place, of course. And without announcing the program, which are more than 60 cool speakers, already about 200 people signed up. So that is cool. So if you're interested in those kind of stuff, feel free to join. And to finish my story, I just wrote a book about it called Nooit Af, which is Dutch for permanent beta, of course. And we wrote a book about what would happen in society if by design the government, especially the government, but also big companies would embrace this permanent better way of thinking. Because I think it will save a lot of time and effort and careers if we would be open and honest about the fact that big governmental projects are never finished when they say it is. And when they say it's finished and it doesn't work, it's wrong and people make mistakes and then you kill careers and then you need more budget and more political hassle. What would happen if you just say, well, we came this far, let's figure out how this works, like the IT of the tax guys, and then as soon as it works you can scale it up and see if it still works and then you can approve it every week again. So I think we have to enter another age. Thank you for listening, and I think we now will have a discussion or something.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, Martijn Aslander. Do you have a question for the audience?
Did it resonate somehow?
You're still here.
Yeah, because I think today a lot of innovation was from what they call the top sector, like the industries. But where are the people? Because there are the people who are doing innovation, not the companies. Yeah, I think it must be those.
Yeah.
Oh, they're skipping.
Imagine you're the prime minister of the Netherlands. Imagine. Can you imagine that?
No, because I come in a lot of places worldwide. The only place that I don't come is politicians, because you cannot work with them. They say A and do B.
So, skip them?
Well, the thing is, no, I'm serious about it. Politicians are about 4 people. They're great people when you meet them individually. As soon as they're a swarm, then it's wrong. No, really, the politics is about 4 things. It's about legislation and stuff like that. Well, it's always too slow. It's about policy, and the thing with policy, the world is moving so rapidly that the long term nowadays is 3 months. Short term is tomorrow. And they don't seem to understand that. And they're always about money. And I think money is overrated. We still need it, but you can apply a lot of resources. And we don't do that. So the government spends money on stuff that it could easily get for free. And I think that's a waste of resources. So I think we have to start thinking not in money, but in resources. And then you can innovate without risk. And if you can innovate without risk, you can innovate without fear. And if you can innovate without fear, everybody can join.
Okay, let's tell them.
Oh, they're gone.
Eva, come join us.
Yes.
Are there any questions from you? Please. Yes.
I would like to know what is the connection with swarms? How do you interpret the concept of swarms? What do you mean by I'm building swarms?
Okay, a swarm is like a network without nodes. So when you look at network and network theory, you see a lot of nodes and connections. With the web, like Wikipedia is less organized than everybody thinks. So it's more than a swarm of a few 100,000 people cooperating together and contributing, like decentralized technology-enabled altruism. And I think that's a good example of a swarm. And I think in a swarm you don't have a hierarchical leader or you don't have a central node. And I think we have to figure out how to weigh in a decentral way without nodes that we are dependent of. So this is I still have to figure out the right language to talk about it, and this is the way that I practice. Try to be on stage.
But you wrote about it, it's in the book, so maybe you can read the book and then it's all in your book.
Yeah, but it's new material. We have to figure out how to talk about it.
Yeah, it's nooit af. Another question. Thank you.
Okay, question for Martijn. Aren't you afraid that in your new world with the swarms, there's only place for people with capabilities, intelligence, or people who can make things?
No, well, you can call them the new elites, and I think if those are the new elites, we're better off than with nowadays elite, unfortunately. But I think we can save tens or maybe hundreds of billions when we quit doing stuff that's not really necessary anymore. We only need a few parts of that to help the people that can't join, because they're digital illiterate or whatever, and we have this obligation to help them as well. But when you look at technology, I know the story about a guy who was mentally disabled and he was steal meters. So we have this case, some of them are very aggressive if anything goes wrong. So you have to guard them with big guards. And they said, okay, very low IQ, and they gave this guy an iPad. And everybody said, don't do that. He will kill you with it, because he will tear it apart and use the glass to cut your throat. And they said, okay, let's try it. So they gave this guy an iPad. And something happened, and this guy became very upset. And what happened was interesting. He went outside of his room with the iPad. He put it on the hole, so. And then he went back in the room, broke everything down, very aggressive, and then thought, whew, and then went outside and got his iPad again, his dear iPad, because that was a way for him to have rhythm, to have a routine, which he needed. And then he embraced technology. You don't have to understand technology to be able to embrace it. So I think technology will help us in many ways.
Martijn, do you have a question for Eva?
Yeah, we had a talk before this, because I don't worry about the environment at all, which I think is funny, because I trust in people like Eva and all the technology that can help her. So there's an interesting debate, because I think a lot of people in the sustainability world, pretty negative people, and not you and not her. So I think it's interesting how we can work together. So how can I help?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, I think actually it's perfect that we spoke, me first and then you, because a lot of the things that I'm presenting can be addressed by the strategies that you're bringing up. And so it's not, what I also said at the end, that I think there's exponential potential and positive change as well. It's just that we need to figure out a way to tap into that and stimulate it. And I think that there is some interesting discussion to be had, because a lot of the point of what I was trying to say is that we need to figure out how to focus, in a way, the beam of innovation on the right places, because there are some problems that are super urgent that we need to address. And you can do that in a decentralized way, just by informing people and allowing people to swarm around certain problem areas and solve those. Or you can do it in a more top-down way, and by also saying, you know, like a government saying, okay, these are our priorities, our top sectors, et cetera. And so, of course, there's a combination of how to do this. But I think, obviously, the new model, the decentralized intelligence of the general population, is by far more rapid and powerful.
Yeah, so I try to focus on the non-monetary ways to figure stuff out, because then you don't need money to start. So it's really fascinating what could happen when you don't use paper, even digital paper, or money to solve something, and you use freely accessible technology to leverage those efforts.
Okay, last question for you both, and then we can discuss maybe somewhere here around, but give me your biggest dream, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Biggest dream.
Biggest dream.
Well, bigger.
Well, I have this big ambition. I thought, okay, what I'm going to do on this planet, because I don't want to meditate, because I think it's a bit boring. So I thought, okay, where's my goal? So I thought, let's try to figure out how to win 2 Nobel Prizes, because there are a lot of people who win one, but 2 is never done before, I think.
No, that's not you.
So I thought, I want to win Nobel Prize for economy and peace. Not me personally, like I won the prize, but I want to work on Nobel Prize winning stuff. And I think those are intertwined, economy and peace. And if we can figure out how to dynamize the world without the use of money, if we can figure that out, and I think we can solve something big.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in about 5 years?
I'm not in a hurry. No, because what I have to do after that, like 20 years.
20 years, okay.
Yeah.
And yours?
Well, just one point. Marie Curie won 2 Nobel Prizes, one in chemistry.
She
and
was a
physics.
woman.
And she was a
Yeah,
woman.
that's totally
and,
different. Applause. Yes.
But anyway, just important. But aside from that, my biggest dream, actually, a lot of the time I say I'm not actually even an environmentalist. I'm like a profound humanist, because I think actually the structure of our economy and the way that everything is set up right now is enslaving lots of people and forcing them to do things that they don't want to do, and you know, participate in a system. And I think my biggest dream would be to figure out a way to transform the economy into a fundamentally different way of functioning within my lifetime, so that I can enjoy part of that post phase, and to do this successfully.
So you're in a hurry?
I'm in a hurry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Eva and Martijn, thank you very much. And now start dreaming, ladies and gentlemen.